I hand over to Jakub. Looking forward to your remarks.
Joseph, thank you very much for this introduction. Yes, we do have official results in Poland now, and Karol Nawrocki is a winner. This was announced by National Election Committee. So there is a definite decision on this, even though the evening yesterday looked like Trzaskowski might be the one winning the elections. And he even claimed the victory in the first minutes after the polling stations closed. But today we'll not be talking about the results this much. Take from what we say, what you wish, and as you will. But we'll be talking about how the campaign looked like online, what innovative tools were being used, what were the disinformation landscape, and what the Poland is up to in 2025 in the light of the election results and the broader geopolitical climate and how it manifested throughout the campaign. I'll start with briefing you with a few innovative tools that were or innovative situations that were created in this campaign that were not that easy to manage for the state authorities and that and for the political campaigns. But this is something that might feed into your global understanding of how the modern digital campaigning looks like currently. And the first thing we observed and we monitored throughout this political campaign was the political advertising spending. And this is a very big change compared to the last elections that we had, the European Parliament elections in 2024. The European Parliament elections are a smaller, quieter campaign election compared to the presidential ones. But over this presidential campaign that we are in, we saw around 4 million euro in spending on political advertising in Poland. This is 4 times what we saw in European Parliament elections a year ago. So this shows a very strong mobilization and very strong spending on behalf of all of the candidates. Not only the candidates were the ones spending the money, but we were following this campaign through the lens of the general political advertising definition that we see on the platforms that also includes the NGOs, the business groups that are using the political advertising. Something new in Polish political landscape, which is the quasi-political action committees, which is the NGOs that are spending their own money, saying publicly this is get out the vote campaign, but pushing the boundaries of what's legal in Polish spending system and supporting their candidates of choice through the foundations, nonprofits, or associations. And we have two major inputs from this ads campaign that might also tell you a bit more about the results that we're seeing today. The first one is that while Meta and Google allow us to follow what are the spendings of political campaigning and what are the spendings of political advertisements, there are other platforms where it's more difficult to follow what's the actual spending or monitor who is spending the money. I'm especially talking about X or Twitter, where over the course of the campaign and especially in the last few weeks, we saw big political advertising spending, but it wasn't always easy to understand who is spending the money. So there was quite a bit of anonymous sources or anonymous accounts that possibly were verified by X, but publicly we didn't see who is spending the money or who is the author of many of those ads. As many of you know, TikTok is not allowing political advertising on their platform, and we didn't see anything to the contrary. But obviously, there are some other ways of mobilizing on TikTok, and this is something we'll talk about in a second. What we also saw is very different approach to political advertising strategy from the candidates. What happened on Nawrocki's side was very strong focus on the issues. So as you see on the left, you see an example of his ad that is talking about the potential censorship online connected to Digital Services Act or connected to some other internet regulations. This is only one of the examples that Nawrocki decided to focus on and target his ads based on specific issues. The others included the migration, which was one of the main issues that was targeted mostly at young men online on Meta and Google, but also included the Green New Deal and also included the messaging of having diversity in government. So showing the fact that the government shouldn't be the same party as the president, because it will be difficult to keep checks and balances in this specific situation. What Trzaskowski did, of course, he also campaigned a bit on the security issues, but most of the political advertising that we saw was connected to the local events he was holding. So he was using those ads to bring people to the events and to mobilize the crowds on the meetings, but not exactly to campaign on specific issues. We will be looking deeper into this after the election, but what we can say today is that this was a 4 times bigger campaign compared to the previous one we saw in Poland. And we imagine this trend will be something that will continue, even though some of the platforms said they will not continue with political advertising because of the regulation and legal risk they see around this. But the results that we saw this morning weren't as surprising if you followed the numbers online throughout the campaign, and if you see how strong the far right vote and the far right parties, they were present online. If you look at the bars here on the right side of the screen, what you'll see is the list of top 20 TikTok accounts across the campaign. And one of the things that was very visible is the fact that Sławomir Mencen, who was the far-right candidate who didn't manage to get into the runoffs, he had a very strong lead when it comes to engagement, when it comes to views, especially on TikTok, and across the young people across Poland. This is something that all of the candidates were trying to chase, but they weren't always successful. And you see that the gap in the far-right candidates and the other candidates was very big. If you look at this chart, you will see that both of the candidates who managed to enter the second round of the election, Nawrocki and Trzaskowski, they performed way weaker on TikTok. And you will also see, if you looked at some other charts throughout the campaign, that Konfederacja, the far-right party, was very strongly mobilized and very active across basically all social media platforms. If you look down, you will see that Konfederacja and Razem, which is a Podemos-style left-wing party, they were very active on TikTok as a platform, while the other parties, the more mainstream parties, didn't manage to catch up with their activity and with putting the content out there. So you'll see that over 74% politicians of Konfederacja were very active on the platform. And if you compare it to Koalicja Obywatelska, it was only 26%. So there was very big gap in the activity on the online platforms. And this is something that helped in mobilizing the right-wing voters, especially the young right-wing voters who also voted for Nawrocki very strongly in the second round. Sławomir Mencen was very active, very present on TikTok, and you will see some of his most viral tweets that were able to bring over 6-7 million views to the messaging that he was pushing through. Obviously, they were very disciplined on their message, and it mostly was talking about the Rafał Trzaskowski being the Rainbow Coalition candidate, being the Green Deal candidate, being the pro-migrant candidate. And all of those 3 messages seemed very effective in generating online engagement and online buzz for him. And one of the things that Josef already mentioned is the fact that we also had a YouTuber candidate in those elections. This is interesting because when he was entering the race, the Krzysztof Stanowski, ex-sports journalist who set up his own YouTube channel that was quite popular even before the elections, He was considered to be one of the anti-establishment candidates, and there were some predictions that he might have a strong polling numbers throughout the campaign. But over the last few months, it was quite obvious that what he's actually after is looking to monetize his channel and monetize his content as much as possible. This is seen in the final results. He managed to get 1.3% of public vote, which is definitely disappointing if someone was looking at him as an anti-establishment force, but his impact on the election was way bigger than the percentage that we see here. First of all, because he was registered as a candidate, he had access to lots of the inner workings of the campaign. So he was able to bring out content such as how they negotiate debate terms and conditions, or he was able to keep up with all of the correspondence that he received from the official campaign channels. But also because his channel was so popular, he was able to host the candidates, interview them, and bring his lens into how they present themselves to the world, especially since he was very successful. It was very impactful on the political debate itself. Channel Zero, as you see on the chart, was one of the top live streams globally. Basically, anytime he was inviting one of the leading candidates to talk with him and to join him on his channel. And this is something that worked for him financially too. If you look at the number of views he was able to generate, it was around 100 million views per month, which is a definite growth over what happened with his channel, even though it was already popular late in 2024. But he also said publicly that the monetization of his channel is around 350,000-400,000 euro per month. And this is definitely one of the most impactful political channels that we see, that might even have bigger impact than some of the traditional mainstream media on the final election result. He was definitely leaning a bit more conservative. He was definitely leaning a bit more anti-establishment. So this challenger status was something that helped him to potentially sway the vote one way or another. And given how close the race was, this is something that might have impacted the results majorly. One other thing that when it comes to the use of digital tools in this campaign is the fact that all of the things that we would discuss even a year ago as very innovative, something to be afraid of, something to keep in mind when talking about the campaign elections as risks, is something that completely materialized fully, is the new normal, and definitely the use of AI tools and AI synthetic media, synthetic videos, deepfakes. This is something that was present all around throughout the campaign. You will see multiple AI-generated images showing blonde white ladies supporting Karol Nawrocki throughout the election, going viral on Meta, going viral on TikTok channels. You will see AI slop campaigns showing the TikTok brain rot videos with the voiceover talking about Rafał Trzaskowski achievements or Rafał Trzaskowski campaign messaging. You could also, like what Trzaskowski campaign also proposed, is the AI video generator that could show you the video of Trzaskowski supporting, like encouraging some of the voters by name to go and vote in the elections. And you also had some of the more left-wing candidates using streaming, playing video games online, and trying to generate an audience online using those tools. So all of this is something that when we started the campaign, we imagined that we'll see a few instances of this, or this will be something that we will be monitoring. But actually, the amount of content that was created and distributed this way made it difficult to discern this from what's the campaign and what's the digital campaign. It was very much digital driven, and all of those new tools were used as just as a new normal for most of the candidates. So this is the background, this is the landscape of digital campaigning that we saw and that we tried to monitor over the last few months. We'll definitely be out there with some deeper insights into how the numbers might have translated into final results. But this very positive, above the line side of the campaigning also has its shadow side, and this is the disinformation or something that might be infringing on the due election process or truth in general. And for this, I will give the floor to Aleksandra.
Thank you so much, Jakub. So if you could move to the next slide. When it comes to disinformation channels, first, I would also like to emphasize the background. That is the social media platforms landscape that has changed severely. For example, at the very beginning of the elections, most of the analysts, they weren't considering YouTube as a key platform for these elections. It was rather TikTok. However, after the campaign actually happened, we've seen obviously that TikTok was supremely important, crazily important. But then on the other hand, the role of YouTube, as Jakub has mentioned before, was also very, very much important, also in the terms of disinformation. There were 3 channels that get very high popularity, including Kanal Zero, mentioned by Jakub before, as well as Sławomir Mencens, so Polish far-right candidate from Konfederacja, who was interviewing both of the candidates in the second round of the election, both Karol Nawrocki and Rafał Trzaskowski, as well as Maciej Maciak. So the pro-Russian far-right candidate who didn't get a lot of votes, but who was used to sharing numerous narratives online. So this landscape for disinformation has also swifted a bit from what we expected at the very beginning. And what did we see when it comes to disinformation? As you can see in the title of the slide, and as I mentioned already, talking about very different channels that were used to distribute disinformation, became very diverse and thus hard to follow. Another trend that was omnipotent in the campaign and already mentioned because it not only influenced disinformation but also other types of campaigning was AI. Numerous disinformation actors used AI to create a lot of videos that were usually of low quality, but they were used to amplify content of certain candidates. So that was another thing that made this disinformation landscape hard to follow, just because the amount of the content has grown immensely, and the number of channels that we were meant to monitor also grown immensely, as it seemed as if it's easier for the creators of these channels to create content, to promote content, to publish content. Probably, again, because of the use of the AI. But what exactly have we seen? There were 5 phenomena that were discovered throughout the whole campaign. First of all, as you can see on the slide, we can see the TikTok of Maciej Maciak. So I already mentioned that we did have a pro-Russian candidate, Maciej Maciak, in these elections. Maciej Maciak's role, obviously, was not to win the elections, as the support that he had was not that huge. However, he was used to amplify content that was strictly pro-Russian disinformation. He had a chance to partake in the public debates on the national TV and then use that content to promote, again, its ideas online. And these were strictly, openly pro-Russian disinformation narratives, talking about the peace narrative, so the narrative that only Russian Federation can guarantee peace in Europe. There were also narratives, smaller narratives, for example, those of European leaders being addicted to drugs, etc., etc. So Maciej Maciak had a network of accounts connected to his to the organization that he leads, Ruch Dobrobytu i Pokoju, so the movement for prosperity and peace. And these accounts were created similarly with the use of RDIP, so the short for the name of the movement that he leads. And they were amplifying this content. He had these networks, interestingly, on YouTube, but later on also on TikTok. What is actually interesting that sometimes the very same accounts, the well-known disinformation accounts, disinformation actors on, for example, X, that were sharing Maciek's narratives, were also the same accounts that were later on sharing the narratives of Grzegorz Braun. So that was one thing. The other thing below you can see poseł Roman Fritz. So what we noticed just before the first round of the election was a very, very viral video of Grzegorz Braun going into the Polish Ministry of Industry and tearing down the EU flag, harassing the people within the ministry. And that went viral. And the level of virality of this video was unprecedented, even in comparison to other similar videos that we've been seeing, for example, from Sławomir Mencen, but also from other actors on the online political spectrum. And this was just in the days very before the first round of the election. So that was the second. It was different, obviously, to what I was saying about Maciek, because it was just a very, very small, like it was one-time accident, but it was related because we can assume that there must have been some kind of network that was promoting that, but also that gained, virality from normal users, right? So that was the second thing that we have observed. Third, as you can also see on the slide, were the TikTok lives. What we have seen is that disinformation actors, not only them, they used the feature to create lives to share numerous disinformation, but also illegal hate speech and sometimes even incitements to violence on TikTok. How it works, a person starts lives, invites few other people to join, and they talk, discuss, whereas others can join and listen to them and maybe comment, and that is all. But as you can see, if something happens live, it is very difficult to moderate it because thinking about the number of moderators that we have in social media platforms and about how quickly this content can, be stored, be finished, etc., the level of moderation is much lesser just because it is much more difficult to moderate this content. And that was one of the things that was actually used very widely by a variety of accounts, mostly, again, promoting disinformation narratives. Then there were also two operations that we've noticed. First was the Operation Doppelganger. So it is a pro-Russian influence coordinated operation that in Poland was targeting both the EU, it was targeting Ukraine, as well as it was sharing electoral disinformation. Doppelganger campaigns currently, before it worked differently. So before, for the Doppelganger campaign, disinformation actors, they were buying certain news pages, they were buying that they were, they were creating links that looked very similarly to normal news. For example, instead of Der Spiegel, you can find Der Spiegel. So it could be easy to kind of, for a reader to go on such a website and then think that it's a real website, whereas it wasn't real. Now they they changed their direction, as maintaining numerous websites is obviously expensive. And instead, what they were doing is they were posting numerous tweets with a whole network of fake bot and troll accounts where they were writing disinformation about the topics that I already mentioned, so anti-Ukrainian, anti-EU, etc., etc. And to promote that, to amplify that, they were using links to real articles from either the far-right media, but also just normal media outlets in Poland that were supposedly proving their point. At least that's the strategy that they take. So they believe that if someone is scrolling and they see their message and they see a link to a real life article, a person would think, okay, this might be true. It might have been a real news outlet who wrote that. This operation, however, was quite clumsy as the language of the operation, so and all the tweets, they were in Polish. However, it was a maximum of A2, B1 Polish. They included a lot of mistakes, a lot of Russicisms, a lot of like grammar mistakes, etc., etc. And then last but not least, we have also seen Operation Overload, so quite similar campaign that was sharing a lot of electoral disinformation. And what I mean by electoral disinformation, this is disinformation that is targeting the elections per se. So it's not disinformation about Ukraine, about health, about LGBT community. It is just disinformation about elections, and it's disinformation that is aimed at discouraging the voters from going out and voting. So we've seen, for example, claims about the bioweapons that were included in the postal ballots. So it was so if a person wanted to, vote by post, which is possible in certain conditions in Poland, they might have been discouraged because they could have read this and then become afraid that if they touch the ballot, they might get infected. Then other accounts on both X but also TikTok, they were sharing election disinformation, both before the first round, after the first round, and before and after the second round, and these were mostly the claims of elections being rigged. This is a very common thing in Poland. Throughout all the other elections that we held in the recent 2-3 years, we've seen these narratives aimed at disbelieving in the elections results, etc., but they did not go as viral. And now, after these 5 key phenomena regarding disinformation, moving on to Konrad.
Thank you, Ola. Let's move to the next slide. Thank you. I'd like to consider what the campaign dynamics tell us about the broader political landscape in which we are, and I will present just 3 points that I'd like you to consider, hoping that it will be useful when you'll be planning or analyzing future campaigns. The first point is the role of security, which, as we have also confirmed in multiple studies, is one of the main concerns of our region of the eastern flank of the EU. Security was brought as the main point at the motto of Polish presidency, and it turned out that it was more important than the Polish presidency after all. As we look at media coverage, both online and in the traditional media, everything regarding Polish presidency of the Council of the European Union was not reported as frequently, and it didn't attract too much attention. And the attempt of Polish government to attract European bodies to the problem of security, although was successful, was less important than what the national institutions were doing to address it. So as Russia continues to increase its military spending and as the war in Ukraine drags on, but also as it became even more uncertain after the announcements from US administration in February that they will not necessarily continue to support Ukraine, it became a most vital issue that Polish society was interested in. However, this doesn't mean that it worked on one side of one of the candidates, because it became something on a consensus level, meaning that all candidates were portraying themselves as the ones that will be able to provide safety, and it turned out that there was a consensus about even the policies. So you see Rafał Trzaskowski promising to increase the spendings to 5% of GDP on the military, and Karol Nawrocki promising to increase the sheer size of our military, although there was no much discussion about it, as most candidates agreed that they would support such measures. In the meantime, Polish government was also introducing some measures to increase our safety efforts, building the so-called Eastern Shield together with support of the EU. But we also suspended the right to asylum, which was a very controversial take, something that was criticized by institutions interested in human rights. However, it was widely accepted as a popular measure. You see on the right one of former generals, now also a YouTuber, who was covering these and other measures at length, and videos about very specific tactical moves about the kinds of weaponry that Poland will be buying were a topic of interest on a large scale. So at the end, we could say that although all the focus studies a year ago would tell us that security would be a top priority of the population, it didn't mean that any of the campaigns was actually bringing some policies that were making them stand out, because basically all the candidates were agreeing on all the measures. What could be impactful in that regard were simply personality traits. So Karol Nawrocki, who was who was known only to people very interested in politics a year ago, was portraying himself as a strong leader, capable of standing up to Vladimir Putin, whereas Rafał Trzaskowski was more interested in portraying himself as a diplomat, being able to bring a broader coalition of Europeans to stand up to authoritarian regimes. But it was not a matter of policies as such, as rather a broader attempt to portray themselves as the right leaders, and meaning that Polish presidency was virtually unseen. Another point that was growing on importance, and this is something unprecedented, but is becoming a pattern in our region, but not only, is the consistency of global of visibility of global actors in the national scenes. So already few months ago, we could see, for instance, Elon Musk publicly supporting specific tweets and retweeting them and commenting, making the Polish politicians or Romanian politicians and Hungarian politicians as well visible to million-wide audience globally. So on the left bottom slide, you see him forwarding a video by Patryk Jaki, a member of the European Parliament, who was talking about implementation of Digital Services Act, and he was portraying it as a draconian law that would mean that people could go to prison for liking a post on Twitter. Although it wasn't true, Elon Musk portrayed it as an Orwellian law that could become reality if Donald Trump wasn't president of the United States, and he was thanking the American public that such measures are not the reality on the other side of the Atlantic. So this was happening for months, and this is something that is now a part of our political discourse online. Also in more traditional settings, we saw Karol Nawrocki meeting personally with Donald Trump just 2 weeks before the first round, and taking a photograph with public endorsement, but also discussing some agreements on microchips and the right to produce and circulate them, and which Poland was allowed to only partially. The details of it were not clear. However, the impact was mostly made through the virality of the meeting and through the public endorsement. And even between the first and second round, we had a Polish edition of CPAC, so Conservative Political Action Conference, happening in Rzeszów, with conservative leaders meeting and mobilizing the audience, as well as exchanging tactics and ideas about how to run a political campaign. We'll have a separate edition of it happening in Hungary with speakers such as Ben Shapiro and a member of Netanyahu's family as well, going there. So we see that the international of populist / anti-elitist movements is cooperating very closely, is giving each other visibility, and is quite successful in doing so. Whereas the more liberal side was more cautious in their attempts. So Barack Obama attended a conference in Poland just 3 days before the first round, But at the end, he didn't meet with Polish liberals publicly. He only had a chat with Timothy Snyder on the challenges of contemporary world. Polish politicians were meeting from time to time with European leaders, but they were rather cautious, not wanting to be portrayed as ones being supported by the liberal side. So we see a huge disproportion here. And on the last slide, I'd like to consider the broader implications that have to deal with the broader trends happening in the last years. So a few years ago, European People Party started the slight turn to the right, trying to incorporate some of the policies of the populist movements. You see here the attempt portraying themselves as the ones capable of securing borders and protecting Schengen via limiting migration. So already in 2023, the Civic platform was running a huge campaign against the previous populist government, portraying them as incompetent, as the ones unable to protect the borders, and as the ones actually responsible for the growing numbers of migrants coming into Poland. And this enabled the current government to replace the populist side. However, what it meant is that that agenda was normalized and became a central part of the political discourse, meaning that before these elections, we had all candidates, including the liberal Trzaskowski, portraying himself as the one who will limit the migration, who will stop the Green New Deal that is supposedly against the interest of Polish farmers, and will be the one protecting our sovereignty. So in the middle, you have the meetings that Ola talked about. So the far-right candidate Sławomir Mencen, who gained 15% of the support, met with both candidates and asked them to sign his policies in exchange for support. So Karol Nawrocki signed all 8 proposals. Rafał Trzaskowski signed some of them and only hesitated on the point of supporting Ukraine's acceptance into NATO and some issues connected with sexual minorities, but then also met with Mencen in private, took photos drinking beer with him, and also normalized the candidate that a few years ago would be quite ostracized, would not be taken seriously. And this meant that Konfederacja is now just one of the options and is actually in the current polls a party that without which there will be no new government, that it will be crucial for forming of new body in the next parliament, and also a new, even far right party emerged, gaining over 1 million votes, because now Konfederacja can be portrayed as the one plotting together with the elites and the one that is a part of the mainstream, meaning that a room appeared for even more extreme candidates, as Grzegorz Braun, a monarchist who's against democracy and European Union, and is portraying Konfederacja as the traitors of the true national values. So probably this will be the situation in which we will work from now on. The next elections are set to happen in 2 years, but we don't know if the current government will keep its support, as it's likely to lose it in the next round. So it is uncertain what will happen in the next 2 years. And that's all from me.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Konrad. Thank you very much also to Jakub and Aleksandra. I thought it was a very good deep dive. Perhaps let's stop the screen sharing. Once again, thank you very much. So let me just tell you in the audience, of course, if you have questions, please do post them in the Q&A. In the meantime, let me ask you, and I know that neither of you is a campaign consultant, but if you, with what you know now and with the analysis that you have done, could advise the Trzaskowski campaign what to do differently digitally, what would your advice be? Jakub, do you want to start?
Yes, of course. I'm happy to take over. So I'm not sure if I saw lots of strategic thinking about digital affairs in this campaign. If you had a closer look at the numbers from January, you could have intervened when it comes to the TikTok presence and mobilization of the MPs of the party. So people who are actually active politicians of the party, they weren't supporting the candidate as strongly as far-right candidates, as far-right MPs were supporting their candidates. Civic Coalition, Trzaskowski Party was very strong on Twitter, but this isn't the most engaging and the most viewed portal in Poland. Facebook is. And on Facebook, what you saw is basically twice as much following and twice as much engagement towards Law and Justice, which being the most popular platform is something that could have definitely been improved. So I would start with those very tactical but like strategic analysis of which platforms should be enhanced, which platforms should be enforced. The data are there, publicly available. So this is something that I would definitely start with. When it comes to content or changing the narratives, I leave it up to Aleksandra or Konrad.
And so just to make sure I understand, Jakub, thanks for that. So you say you haven't really recognized a very strategic approach. So that would be kind of a challenge to the strategy itself, that is not really recognizable. And that it also, if there was a strategy, wasn't super well executed because apparently people didn't support their candidate as much as they could have, right?
I don't want to say that digital translates directly into the results, but I feel that both of the mainstream parties are relying very heavily on traditional media landscape, and they are prioritizing it. And I believe in this election, maybe it was one of the first ones that this wasn't the only thing that was important here. And I believe that Law and Justice was stronger and was more effective, more robust in how they approached the campaigning online. Janusz Cieszyński, who is one of the Law and Justice digital strategists and an MP, he shared a post-mortem of the campaign, of the digital campaign on the Law and Justice site that I'm very happy to share in the link. Here it's in Polish, but it shows you 3 or 4 key success measures that they saw and that they strategically approached throughout this campaign. And I'm not sure if Civic Coalition campaign could show you a similar breakdown of how they approach the digital space. I'll send the link to the chat.
Great, thank you, Konrad, Aleksandra. What should the Trzaskowski campaign have done differently, or could have done differently in the digital game? Any suggestions from your side?
Okay, I could take on that, and also on the question that I see on chat.
Yes.
About the way to act within the TikTok lives and trying to fight disinformation there. So when it comes to the campaign, I think it's a matter of strategy, as Jakub mentioned, this coherent strategy. It's also, I would actually try to take that on my own field, so disinformation. I think throughout this whole elections, we have seen that there's a huge need for a joint campaign on tackling and countering disinformation, as at least several candidates, they were using the narratives that were shared either domestically, but also amplified sometimes by foreign actors, as I mentioned in the Operation Doppelganger Overload. So I think the country very much needs this kind of a joint agenda on how to tackle this issue, because we do not have a clear answer, and that is clearly influencing other candidates' campaigns. It's not happening, just in this one bubble where, people read this information that does not influence them. It is actually influencing the candidates and their campaign, and then the potential successes that they have if they cannot win the infosphere. So that would be my point. But regarding to Kasia's question about the way to act within these TikTok lives, it is very difficult. TikTok allegedly has a group of moderators that is interfering if these lives are reported. But however, again, this is very difficult. In my opinion, it is not sufficient enough. Just because of the feature that these lives are. So they can be very quick. You need to the algorithm will show those to you, but it's not that easy to kind of find different lives on your own if you do not know, for example, the channels that are doing this. So even to report those is an obstacle, and it's a full-time job to be finding this, to be listening to this. They're not transcribed, they're not saved. So after the live is finished, you cannot, as a normal TikTok user, you cannot go back to those and listen again and think of what you've heard. So even these things kind of affect how difficult it is to act within those. So when it comes to fighting disinformation there, we've been reporting those to Twitter, to TikTok. And for our reports, TikTok was actually responding. So I would like to emphasize that also. So there was a reaction thanks to the line of communication that we had. But again, just because those are very, it's impossible to monitor that 24 hours a day for an organization or even for several organizations. So that's why fighting disinformation there is very difficult. And in my opinion, as per now, it has not yet been established how to do it effectively. But of course, cooperating with TikTok, for example, and TikTok enhancing their live moderator resources, I would say this is a step in the right direction.
Yeah, I'll just add one thing to this, is that those TikTok live broadcasts aren't archived in any way, so they are they are out there, and then you can't find them if the account is down or if a new account is being set up to continue those conversations. They are very ephemeral, and it's difficult to do a substantive research on them. But yeah, it's like what Aleksandra said is all true, and we tried to make sure that when we saw a live like this, but there were dozens of them all the time, every day, to flag it with TikTok, and they actually were responsive to our flags.
I could also take up on the follow-up question, if that's okay, Josef, because it's very much related.
Discord and Twitch, yeah.
Exactly, yeah. So when it comes to Twitch, yeah, of course, there were lives on Twitch that were both coming from very different parts of political spectrum, but also the more disinformative part. So it was happening there as well. When it comes to Discord, up to my knowledge, I don't recall any lives there, but of course there are Discord channels that are used to promote certain types of disinformation, and it's happening live as usually it happens on a closed forest. So you need to kind of apply, and then the moderator of a certain part of Discord of a certain forum, they need to accept you and get you in, and that's why moderation there is very difficult. So I can only assume based on the groups in which I am that it's been happening, and it's probably been happening in quite a high number of groups, but not in a way it's happening on TikTok lives. Yeah.
Thank you very much for this. We are entering the last 5 minutes. So my last question to you three would be, looking forward, to the next election. So we talked about the past one, which is really just passed yesterday night. But if you look ahead to the next couple of years, what would your expectations be that is being changed? Would you think that a proper strategy is being introduced? Would you expect the digital game to change? Konrad, I'll start with you. What adaptations would you anticipate?
Thank you. I think the growing importance of lifestyle content that only subconsciously adds some political worldview is something that was crucial in that election and is likely to grow. So what Kuba showed us about Channel Zero, about the YouTube candidate, was that discussing the current football events, the current funny videos, he was just subtly portraying some of the views that he felt closer to, and most of his users were not mainly considered interested in politics as much, but were following him mostly for entertainment, mostly for information about the world around them, about gossip or even sports news. So this is something that at the end I believed was important because he also introduced some serious messaging in that, and the whole well-oiled machine of network of accounts reposting it and micro-influencers producing small opinion pieces daily was something that the winners were very successful at, and I believe that all other political players should adapt to it. That would be.
Thank you. Jakub, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, some final words from me. There was also a question about Dominik Tarczyński in the chat, and I'll also pick up on this because it's not surprising that the international audience will see Dominik Tarczyński, Patryk Jaki, Ewa Zajączkowska-Hernik, the MEPs that are very heavily pushed algorithmically, especially on Twitter and on TikTok. And they are embraced by the global CPAC, global MAGA networks, and you can definitely see that their messages are being amplified globally to the global audience as a part of a different Europe growing, a new Europe, a Europe that is more negative on the EU integration, or that's more aligned with the conservative messages. So yes, I do agree that that Tarczyński is a visible actor, but also internationally and also as a part of the more global machinery. But yes, if you go to our website, if you look at the data from across the campaign that were published every 2 weeks, you will see that those far-right candidates were doing way better online. And if you look back to January to February, you will see that they were there all the time. So I think there's a lots of work, lots of structural work on the liberal side to rebuild their networks, to propose entertaining, engaging content, and to see where the gaps are and try to catch up on them as soon as possible.
Thanks for the Jakub. Aleksandra, you have the last words. What changes do you expect?
I can only second what Jakub and Konrad said. I believe that in the next 2 years we'll see the more of what we've seen already. So more of lifestyle content that is also including again political messages, but also disinformation. For example, the phenomenon of tradwives was not mentioned here, but this is something that this type of content is something that I expect to grow in the future. Will we see a better liberal strategy? I don't know. Let's keep our fingers crossed for the election of 2027.
Thanks for that. Thanks everyone for participating. Thanks for partnering. And a great webinar it was. We'll have the recording and the summary for you ready very soon. Thanks all for participating and for your questions, and have a great week, everybody. Cheers.